40s, more than 70% of Americans get it in their taps. The CDC, American Dental Association, and American Academy of Pediatrics support fluoridating water, citing studies it reduces tooth decay by 25%.
Cavities can obviously cause pain and suffering. People can get very bad infections. Also, many people miss time from school, from work.
The issue is getting growing attention because of new research and recent public comments by RFK Jr., Donald Trump's choice to lead HHS, who wrote on social media, the Trump White House will advise all U.S. water systems to remove fluoride from public water. In an editorial in JAMA Pediatrics, Dr. Bruce Lamphere says study shows it is time to reassess fluoride in drinking water.
The conclusions are sufficient to raise serious questions about fluoride's toxicity to the developing brain. That means we need to pause. We need to give ourselves a chance to look at this evidence fresh.
There is research being conducted in the United States by scientists at UNC Chapel Hill. They are looking at babies 6 months old and younger, some that consume fluoride in their water, some who do not, and they're going to follow them for 4 years to see what develops. Back to you.
Stephanie, thank you so much. Well, now let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel for more on this study and some other health headlines. Dr. Patel, good morning. This has really become a talker, I think, kind of politically. I've seen a lot of stuff about fluoride on TikTok, so a lot of people are getting this information. This particular study, it focused on the impact that high fluoride exposure can have on pregnant women and children. What do you think about this? How concerned should people be about drinking public tap water? And what do we need to know and put in context about fluoride?
Yeah, Savannah, right now, so I reviewed these studies, and this was kind of what we call a study of studies. They looked at a series of over 70 studies, mostly outside of the United States. So I just want to emphasize that, just because we do have different restrictions and guidance that we give in the United States for how to add fluoride into tap drinking water. So right now, none of these studies really point to anything that would cause us to concern ourselves about fluoride literally being a causation for that lower IQ. They found a statistical correlation. We've talked here about studies where the correlation doesn't mean causation. It's a pattern. It merits further research. And I would just caution again that we do have pretty strict guidelines around fluoridation. And if you're in a high fluoridated area, you can have a conversation with your doctor about whether you want to use some sort of filtered water. I would say that pregnant women have had those conversations with me often because of these very concerns. And it's important to just shine light on what your fluoridation levels are, how your children might be getting fluoride in addition to their drinking water, and what you might talk about with your dentist, which is another source of dental guidance for where you get fluoridation from. Dentists are using this commonly with children, and this is another point of conversation. But nothing in these studies would alarm me to changing the habit of what I do or recommend for people with their tap drinking water. But as you heard from Stephanie's reporting, more research into whether there is some causation, I think, is necessary. I'll also add, Savannah, that they didn't even find statistical significance for girls. So they saw a pattern with boys, and they saw a pattern for pregnant women, but not necessarily for girls. That also raises some red flags in researchers about the merit of these studies.
Absolutely. Important context so that you've actually read the studies, not just watched a 30-second video that circulates online. I appreciate that very much. The FDA is also getting some pushback this week. This is another concern for parents. It's releasing new guidelines just yesterday. It's about lowering the max amount of lead that is acceptable in most processed baby foods. These new rules ultimately could reduce lead exposure by about, look at this number, 20 to 30%. This is foods like jarred fruits and vegetables, yogurts, dry cereal. What can parents do to ensure their children are eating the safest and cleanest food possible? I know, as somebody who does not have a lot of experience here, not having children, I'm like, how much lead could there possibly be in baby food, and how's that possible? What do parents need to know?
Right. Yeah, so here's the bottom line. There is no safe amount of lead in any food, whether it's processed baby foods or whole grains or anything like that. There is no safe amount of lead. So I think these FDA kind of proposed lower limits. First of all, they're not mandatory. So this is something that we're going to watch and see if the FDA exacts enforcement authority in the coming years. But the new guidance, as you mentioned, Savannah, does try to aim to reduce that lead exposure. This comes on the heels of stories like we had about a year ago, where we saw lead reported in those apple pouches and some of those fruit pouches. Here's what parents should do. Here's what I even try to do. You just have to try to make sure that you're giving your children a variety of foods to minimize exposure from a single source. If you do what I do, where you're using kind of the same packets of applesauce, for example, for your children, try to just get something different. Even try to look into fresh fruits that you can prepare. I know that's hard, so I say that with a big asterisk. Make sure you're washing fruits and vegetables thoroughly, and then check for product recalls. Keep in touch with the FDA information so that if you have something that's got lead, you can throw it away.
Love that. Great tips there. Okay, before you go, I do want to talk